Can you please confirm if you can see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Good. Okay. Give me 1 second and then we'll start the class. Give me 1 sec. Okay, let's just go ahead and get started. I think we are about 23 people in the call, so let's just see if somebody else joins. And okay, anyway. So good afternoon, everyone. This class is for MA first year students for course 2, and the course 2 is titled American Literature. We started, for those of you who have missed, or if this is your first class, we have started the course by talking about the major themes in American literature. Then we moved on to American fiction. Yesterday, we discussed Edgar Allan Poe's work, one of his short stories, and then we talked about the themes in that short story. We also talked about two 19th century American novelists, Herman Melville and then Mark Twain. Today, what we'll do is we'll continue the discussion on American fiction, but in a different century. So we will look at 20th century and then see works of two more great authors, Hemingway and Faulkner. Both of them got Nobel Prizes, so very important. Okay, so the objectives for today's class are to first talk a little bit on these two authors, Hemingway and Faulkner. We will see what their styles are, writing styles are. And then what we'll do is we'll take one work from each of these authors and look at the story and the plot of these works. And then we'll discuss the themes and then see, if it aligns to what we are discussing about their styles. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Okay, moving on. Hemingway, let's talk about Hemingway first. Hemingway was born in 1899. He was an American novelist. He wrote a lot of short story collections. He was a journalist in the Spanish Civil War and the World War also. And like I mentioned earlier, he won the Nobel Prize. He won that in 1954. He wrote like 7 novels and then multiple short story collections, 2 nonfiction works. So he's done quite an amount of work. Now he became suicidal and then he died in 1961 by suicide. Okay. So that's about, like a really short glimpse of his life. But before looking at one of his works, let's see how he wrote. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about what his style was. Just like we looked at how Edgar Allan Poe wrote yesterday, what his style was, we'll look at Hemingway today or now. So Hemingway's style was fundamentally shaped by his life experiences. What does that mean? He had a lot of life experiences, like I mentioned in his bio. He was a journalist. He did a lot of work in the war, and he was part of multiple wars as a journalist. So he has seen death from a very close distance. So his writing kind of reflected his life experiences. Again, what does this mean? In the war, when the wars happened, and when I say war, from a Hemingway perspective, it's the Spanish Civil War and the World Wars, okay, the 2 world wars. Now, in the war, people realized that, central institutions like the government and related institutions, they were actually not able to save their people. The whole purpose of a government is to take care of the people. And then people have realized when there is a war situation, the government is kind of sort of helpless, or they are not interested in saving the people. One of these two things. People died everywhere and politicians couldn't do anything to stop it. Now, what happened is people realized that these politicians said something, but the reality was something else. They would say that, we will save people, we will do this, we will do that. But then the reality was something else. So from a literature perspective, this reflected as a kind of moving away from the 19th century writing. 19th century writing, as we've seen, was elaborate, used a lot of literary devices and everything. Coming to Hemingway, he moved away from all this. And then he created a new style. He used very simple language. His characters spoke in simple sentences, very short sentences, straightforward. And he was basically saying more in his work with less. He used very little or very less number of words, but he was saying a lot. So we can, in a way, call his style minimalistic. Okay, so he would use minimum number of words, but they were packed with meaning. Okay, we'll see what that means in the future slides. Okay, before we go into Hemingway's work, I'll have to mention something called iceberg theory. This is from Hemingway. Iceberg is something, there's a picture on your screen. There's a little part of that ice on the top, but then there's a huge part that is not visible. It's under. Now, Hemingway coined a term for his own style. He called it the iceberg theory. Why iceberg? And like I said, if you look at an iceberg, very little part of it is actually visible. A big chunk of it is actually under the water. So from a Hemingway perspective, what he says is, if a writer of prose knows enough of what he is writing about, so if he knows what he is writing about, he or she is writing about, he may omit these peripheral things. He may omit these things that he knows. Why? Even when the writer omits these things, right, the readers will have a feeling of what is omitted. So we will automatically understand. We as readers will automatically understand what is omitted, just like the iceberg. For if you look at an iceberg with a naked eye, only part of it is visible. Only the top part is visible. But we all know that this is not the whole picture. There is a big chunk hidden underwater. We all know that. Okay, this makes sense for an iceberg, but what does this got to do with writing? For writing, what can be visible and what can be hidden? Okay. Now, Hemingway says aspects like, words, gestures, other peripheral things in writing are visible because they're all described. Author writes about these in words. So you see the words, they describe things. So you see all those, but aspects like, beliefs or biases or fears, these things are hidden. The author does not explicitly tell you about these things. And that's, again, Hemingway's style. He doesn't explain the hidden stuff. He lets it be hidden. Okay. He says, I will only give you simple sentences and then what is required. As a reader, it's your job to go under that and then you will understand. Now, he believes that we will still understand the hidden stuff because of the way he writes it. Okay. That's the greatness of Hemingway. Even though he doesn't explicitly tell us stuff, we will still understand. So because he hides or omits things, right, in his writing, the iceberg theory is also sometimes called theory of omission. It's sometimes called theory of omission. People call it iceberg theory, whichever way. And just like the iceberg, one most important point is the hidden part is the most strongest. If you look at an iceberg, the smallest part that is visible on the top is the weakest one. I mean, that it seems very, non-threatening. And then you would think that it will not cause any harm. The hidden part is the most strongest. So now using that analogy, Hemingway's work also, things that he doesn't say contribute to the most of the story. Things that he says are very kind of okay kind of things. But what he doesn't say is what brings the beauty of his stories. Okay. Did everybody understand what iceberg theory is? Any questions? Because this is the core of Hemingway's style of writing. Any book that you take from Hemingway, you will find this. Very simple sentences, very simple, straightforward things. But that simplicity is deceptive. Okay, he is actually trying to tell something much more complicated under those words. Make sense, guys? Everybody?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. So kind of a related thought is that, like we discussed, Hemingway's style is filled with simple sentences. But the next question will be, but is his style really simple? I mean, what is the simplicity? The simplicity is sometimes, like I said, is deceptive because like we saw in the iceberg theory, there is a lot hidden. So from the reader's perspective, we need to actually dig out these hidden aspects because he's not telling us. It's our job as readers to go and then dig out these hidden aspects and then understand these. Now, like I said, Hemingway says if the writer knows perfectly what he is writing about, then the reader can easily understand not only what is being said, but then what is also hidden. Okay, he says there is a responsibility of the author and also there is a responsibility of the reader. What's the responsibility of the author? That he or she should know exactly, precisely what he or she is writing about. What's the responsibility of the reader? The reader should look at the face value of those sentences and then try and think about the connotative meaning. It's not just the denotative meaning, but then the connotative meaning of what the author is trying to say. Okay. If you remember from yesterday, Edgar Allan Poe also said something similar, right? He said, words are all okay, but then to find the meaning of a written text, you should go one level beneath the words. Okay. You can't just read the words and then take them at face value. The meaning is hidden one level beneath. So it kind of aligns to what Poe said, and then Hemingway says pretty much the same thing. Okay, now we will move to one of Hemingway's works. It's called The Sun Also Rises. It was published in 1926. It's there in your, I think the summary is there in your book, but I'll give you a very quick summary. This work is divided into three parts. On the surface, it's a love story between this guy called Jake Barnes. This guy is served in the World War, and then he gets hurt, and physically gets hurt, and mentally goes through a trauma. And the physical hurt makes him impotent. Okay. And then there is this lady called Lady Brett Ashley. Now, Jake has seen, like I said, has seen horrors of the war, but then he has also seen the after effects of it. Hold on for 1 second. Somebody has raised their hand. Samsung SMM115F. You've raised your hand. Do you have a question? Okay, we'll just move on. If you have a question, then raise your hand again, and then you can unmute yourself and then talk. Where was I? Oh yeah, Jake has, like I said, he has seen horrors in the war, but then he's also seen the after effects of it. Now, Brett, this lady, has numerous love affairs, and then she is an independent woman, but then she has multiple love affairs. Now, this is a general reflection of this, not the love affairs, but this is a general reflection of the society in 1920s, where, people or women started being independent, and then these ideas came into the society as a whole. Now, Brett keeps having affairs, and then she also has an affair with Jake's friend. This guy's name is Robert something. I forgot what the name is, Robert something. And then she also seduces a young bullfighter called Romero. And then, like I said, she has multiple things going on at the same time. Now, all through this story, Brett and Jake are in love with each other, but both of them know that they have no chance at a stable relationship. They both know that, it's not going to work out. Now, the story is filled with bullfighting, fishing, drinking alcohol. There's jealousy between men for Brett's attention. So Jake, like I said, loves her. Robert loves her. And then Romero has a relationship with her. So all of them want Brett. Now, that's the story. And then in the last part of the story, book 3, it's all the aftermath of a fiesta. I mean, fiesta is a celebration, a festival, mostly in the Spanish-speaking countries. So there's a fiesta, and then all these people go there, and then book 3 is the aftermath of that fiesta. Jake goes to a place in Spain, and then he receives a telegram from Brett. Brett says, please come help me. And what she does is she stays in Spain after the bullfight with that bullfighter Romero. But then she leaves him eventually, and then sends a telegram to Jake. The novel ends with Jake and Brett in a taxi. They are going in a taxi, and then speaking of, quote unquote, things that might have been. So they're talking about, now Brett says, how wonderful it would be if it was like this. And then Jake says, yeah, can you imagine how well it would have been? So things that might have been basically means that could have happened if Jake and Brett got married. They expressed their love to each other, and then, got married and all. So the novel ends with a kind of a positive note, if you really want to look at it that way. But overall, it touches upon multiple themes. Okay, one of the major themes is lost generation. Does anybody know what lost generation is? It's not specific to this novel. It's a group of people at the early 20th century. Anybody? Do you know what lost generation is, or who are these people? Okay, no problem. These are the people who, okay, first, lost generation. We'll have to think about what is this lost generation? Why are they lost? Where are they lost, right? These were the people who were in like their teenage and early adulthood during the World War I. So World War I happened at the starting of the 20th century. So 1914 to 1918 is when World War I happened. So these people were, in early adulthood at that time. These people are called lost generation. Specifically authors. A few authors, we'll talk about them. But, why were they lost? The war kind of left a permanent impact on these people. And they were kind of disoriented. They were directionless. When something as big as World War I happens, the aftermath of it is obviously, as we can imagine, is horrible, right? So, and then these people were in their early adulthood, so, their teens and everything. And the impact was even higher for these people. Now, this is not specific to, teens or tweens or anything, but this was how most of the war survivors were. They were heavily traumatized, and then they lost faith in humanity, and then they saw all the atrocities of the war firsthand. So they were completely directionless and then lost. So that's lost generation. That's one of the themes. Now, why is that a theme? Now, if you look at it, Jake, this our hero guy, for lack of a better word, our protagonist, he experiences war, then also experiences, the after effects of war. And then, he kind of sort of falls into that lost generation area. Okay, so that's one theme. And a related theme is alienation. I think if you remember from our first class, this is one of the major themes in American literature that we talked about. Characters in this novel are, unable to live normally because of the trauma that they have been through because of the war. They feel out of place. They feel like they don't belong to the society that they live in. So how do they come out of this? Now this is a feeling, right? This is a feeling of, it's not that they really don't belong to the society that they live in. It's a feeling that, they are alienated, right? But how do they come out of this? In this particular work, the remedy for this alienation for the characters is drinking alcohol. And then, you see a lot of references to alcohol, and then they keep drinking alcohol as a remedy for their trauma. And another remedy is like watching bullfighting and sports, basically, aggressive sports like bullfighting. So by watching these aggressive sports, that's a way for these characters to forget the trauma, and then they try to remedy their experience. That's one of the themes. So if you notice, I'll just make a quick point here. If you notice, we talked about these, I think 8 or 9 or 10 major themes in American literature in the first unit, first chapter, I don't know what you call it, first chapter or something. But if you look at it, you keep seeing all those things getting repeated in pretty much everything that we talk about. So that's the reason why, excuse me, I said the first chapter is extremely important. Okay, once you understand what the first chapter is talking about, first unit is talking about, you can relate it to the rest of the book in an easy way. As long as you know the story or the plot of the novel or the drama or whatever you're talking about or answering about, you can actually go back and then relate it to the first chapter. Okay, that should be your approach to this whole course. You should be perfect in first chapter, and then everything else is basically relating it to the first chapter, the themes and everything. And then you if you are prepared with a little bit of history for novel as well as short story as well as poetry as well as drama, then you're all set. I mean, that should be an easy exam for you. Okay, anyway, coming back to our story. Love is another theme. Not only love between Jake and Brett because of their love story, which is the major thing going on in the story, but love between Brett and her fiance. She has a fiance, and then she loves the love between Romero and Brett. So there's multiple couples. I mean, Brett is the common factor here, but all these characters have different kinds of feelings for Brett, and love comes out as a theme that way. Any other themes that you can think of? We talked about lost generation, we talked about alienation, and we talked about love. Anything else that you would think can be a good theme for this? Anybody can answer. That's fine.
And being isolated is also a theme.
Oh, okay, very good. Being isolated. Can you just explicate it a little bit? Can you explain that a little bit? Why do you think isolation?
Yes, because no one supports and no one agrees with you, so it results in the isolated person. There is no support from anyone.
And
no support from society and family.
Okay, no support from society and family.
Yeah, and
okay.
No one agrees with him. No one agrees with them.
Okay, good. What else? Anything else?
No one is there to care her.
Who? Care for Brett?
They reject society.
You're saying no one is there to care for Brett or something else?
In society, they can't fit.
Say that again.
In the society is rejected, so they do not fit in there.
Right. Hold on for 1 second, guys. I'm having trouble with my laptop. Give me 1 sec. Let me just try to fix it.
Okay, sir.
I think it's fixed. I'm not sure, but anyway. Okay, yeah, that's a good one. Isolation, alienation, related ones, lost generation, related to. Anything else?
Friendship, sir.
What is that? Uma Maheshwari, are you going to say something?
Yes, sir. Everyone is avoiding because to protect the society or to protect the house or to protect everyone. That is isolation.
Okay. Can you say it in other terms, or you're saying protecting the society?
Yes, sir. So that we are isolating somebody to protect
Vishwakarma
society and everybody.
Okay, I'm not sure if I got you completely because there's some voice at the background, but you're saying protection from the society by the society, if I understood it correctly.
If we isolate that particular people, we can protect this isolation.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Okay, good. Bhuvana Acharya is saying friendship. Ashwini is saying friendship. Okay. Friendship. Can one of you explain what friendship are you talking about here? This is different from love, right? So what friendship? Where did we see friendship in this?
Maybe
in
it's
this novel?
affection.
Affection. Okay. Okay. Archana is asking any difference between alienation and isolation. No, they are related, right? Now, alienation is something that happens not because of what you think, but it happens by external factors. Like, let's say you go to US or UK or Australia, wherever. Okay, now that's a new culture for you, and you will feel alienated in the initial stages. Why? Because there is a period of acculturation. There is a period where you will have to get accustomed to their culture. You have to get accustomed to their faces. You have to get accustomed to their lifestyle, and then everything changes, right? But for the initial few days, you would feel alienation. Okay, so that's that. Now, isolation is a related one, but a little different. Isolation is where you feel isolated. You feel that you don't even belong there. Like nobody is helping you. You're alone. That's isolation.
Living alone. Aloneness.
Aloneness. Yeah. Okay. Good. Good word. Yeah, that's true.
Thank you, sir.
Could provide temporary relief from after war living among friends. Okay. Ashwini is saying could provide temporary relief from after war living among friends. Yes, that's correct. Now, like I said, right? Yeah, this is a good thought. But like I said, these people didn't depend on their friends for that relief, Ashwini. What they did is they unfortunately they depended on alcohol and then aggressive sports. But that's a good thought. That's something that causes temporary relief. But that's a very good segue into my next point. Let's talk a minute on the title of his work. Okay. Why do you think this is sun also rises? And this has nothing to do with the sun. It has nothing to do with rising. So why sun also rises? This doesn't make any sense looking at the story, right? The reason why this is called the sun also rises is this title is a biblical reference. It refers to Ecclesiastes. There's this King Solomon. He says sun rises, sun goes down to his place where he arose from. Okay, so he basically says the sun rises, the sun goes down from where he came. Okay, that's enough for our discussion. We don't have to go into the biblical reference, but then the next question will be, what has this got to do with the story? When you think of the human condition, the way we live, it is filled with ups and downs. It's not that every day we are very happy or every day we are sad, right? We are happy sometimes and the sad at other times. So we have things to celebrate. We have things to feel sad about. We live in this never-ending cycle, just like how the sun goes down, comes up again every day, next day. One way of looking at it is, while the characters of this novel have despair and then feel alienated and, like Ashwini said, isolated and everything, they still have hope that the sun will rise next day. It's not like it's going to be all bad things, all despair and everything, there is also going to be a time when the sun rises. So there is hope. That's what it means. Okay, let's go back to Hemingway's style. Now, this novel is a classic Hemingway. Why? Because it's written in simple sentences. No extra information is given. Only the most required information is given, and the reader is left to understand the rest. Now, you will have to, as a reader, you'll have to be aware of the, that one level below the word meaning that we were talking about. And if you see, this is in line with the iceberg theory also, right? For example, Hemingway doesn't explicitly say that Brett is a beautiful woman. Okay. He just says, while Brett is walking, people turn their heads. That's what he says. Now, he doesn't explicitly say Brett is, beautiful or anything of that. He doesn't use the word beautiful, but he just says that people turn their heads when Brett is walking by. As a reader, I'm sorry, can you repeat that? Ignoring
the people.
Okay, yeah, but she is ignoring the people, but people are not ignoring her. People are turning their heads. Why will they turn their heads? Because she is beautiful. Okay, so as a reader, we understand that Brett is beautiful, even though the author hasn't mentioned it. He doesn't say Brett is beautiful, but he says, when somebody is walking by, everybody turns their heads and looks at this person. That's how he tells it. When would somebody look at the other person? When one of the things is when they are extremely beautiful. So that's Hemingway's style. Now, he also avoids a lot of, abstract or complicated words. His words are pretty simple. And one other striking feature is that, it's just one sentence after the other sentence. They are just tagged. Okay. No commentary, no explanation, no nothing, just one sentence after the other. And then at face value, they tell you the story. And then as a reader, when you think about it, it tells you the real story underneath. Now, it's all a series of short sentences to begin with. There is actually a technical term. It's called parataxis, but let's not go into that. Something like, when somebody says, I came, I saw, I conquered. We all heard this, right? I came, I saw, I conquered. Now, it can also be told in a full page, saying that I came, I sat down, I looked at the sun, I did this, I ate lunch, then I saw something, and then blah, 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 right? It can be said that way also. Or it can just say, I came, I saw, I conquered. Very simple, one semi-sentence after the other. We still understand what the meaning is. Okay, so simplicity is the key to Hemingway. That's the way you'll have to remember him. Parveen, do you want to say something? You're unmuted.
Sorry, sir, by mistake it has.
Oh, no problem, no problem. Okay, let's go to Faulkner. Any questions on Hemingway? Or can we move on? Okay, let's go to Faulkner. William Faulkner was born in 1897. He was an American novelist. He was a short story writer. And just like Hemingway, he also won a Nobel Prize in Literature in 1949. Faulkner is different from Hemingway. Let's first see how he is different and how his style is different. And then we will look at, again, one of Faulkner's works. Now, Faulkner is from a Southern background. What does that mean? Southern states. You remember yesterday we had this small discussion about American Civil War, where the North and the South fought, and then eventually the North won. Okay, this was relating to slavery, if you all remember from yesterday's class. So Faulkner is from the Southern background. Okay, he was born in this state called Mississippi, which is one of the Southern states in US. His idea of slavery in the South was that while it is bad, he says, yeah, slavery is bad. Of course, it's bad. But then he says he is kind of a little conflicting there. He's contradictory. Now, he also says desegregation. Desegregation basically means, in terms of slavery or in times of slavery, blacks were supposed to live at one place and whites were living at one place. And colored people would only go to certain schools if they can at all. And then whites would go to, these posh schools and whatever. So there was segregation of these groups based on the color of their skin, which is horrible. But that was the reality at that time. Now, desegregation basically means reversing this. The idea that everybody should live together in harmony. That's the desegregation goal. Now, Faulkner said, while the slavery and all is very bad, desegregation should not be forced onto people. it should be let to go slow. Now, what does go slow mean? If you go slow on desegregation, that means there will be more and more and more violence against non-white people. So because, as you can see, this is like a very controversial view, and then Faulkner got a lot of criticism for this. And because all this happened because of his Southern background. Anyway, Faulkner is different from Hemingway in one very big way. Now, Hemingway, we saw he was minimalistic, right? He used very less number of words and simple sentences, did not provide all this elaborate commentary and documentary and everything. Now, Faulkner, on the other hand, used something called stream of consciousness. Does anybody know what stream of consciousness is? This should come up in your British literature class. Have you come until there yet? What is stream of consciousness? Anyone? Okay, that's fine. Stream of consciousness is it's a literary technique where it's used to depict the various thoughts and feelings that pass through the mind of the narrator. So whoever is narrating, there are thoughts, these thoughts in your mind, right? It's basically a technique where you're describing, or the narrator is describing all these thoughts. Now, these thoughts they don't have to necessarily be related. For example, you might be thinking about Faulkner now because I'm talking about him, right? So Faulkner is occupying your mind. But he's not the only one that's occupying your mind. You might be also thinking about, how you can enjoy Sunday evening after all these classes are done. You might be thinking about, oh, Sunday is the only day that I get, but then, he's giving me this lecture and all this. Then you will think about, how tomorrow you have to wake up early in the morning, or about your family, or when you can watch the latest movie, or, put something on Netflix and binge watch. All these things are happening at the same time. All these are distinct thoughts. They have nothing to do with each other, but they keep coming and going out of your mind. And then, you're not just thinking about this lecture. You're not just listening to me, but then all these thoughts are coming in and out. This is flowing as a stream, right? A stream, a water stream. That's how it's flowing. Now, stream of consciousness is basically writing about this thought process. So they'll start talking about something, abruptly they will move to something else, then abruptly they'll move to something else. So this is stream of consciousness. And again, like I said, you will talk about this when you discuss James Joyce or Virginia Woolf or people like that, authors like that in British literature course. I'm not sure if you have come until that time period and then these areas. That's why I've explained what stream of consciousness is. But anyway, for now, remember that Faulkner used this technique in his work. Okay. Any questions on stream of consciousness, or can we move ahead?
Sir, please go on, sir.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I keep asking this not only to get answers, but also to make sure that I'm audible, because sometimes it just goes mute and then don't know. Okay. Then now we'll move on to one of Faulkner's works. It's called Light in August. It's a wonderful book. It was published in 1932, and this is a novel that is set in the interwar period. What is interwar? So it's between World War I and II. Okay.
Sir, please, can you say me this, which unit is?
Which unit? I have no. Can somebody help? Which unit?
Seventh unit. Page number.
7.3.
Page number 73.
Okay. Can everybody go on mute? Okay. Can one person repeat what they just said?
Page number 7th unit.
Okay. Did you get the answer? The person who asked the original question?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So this novel is set in American South again, because, like I said, American South sensibilities come across in Faulkner's work a lot. Now, this American South in the 1930s. Okay. So that's a very, sad, bad period in world history, especially in right after the World War I, and then, the Great Depression and everything. Anyway, it begins with this lady. Her name is Lena Grove, and she's a young pregnant white woman. And she is basically trying to find the father of her unborn child. Now, she gets pregnant by this guy, and then he gets fired from his job, and then he moves to another place. And then, he'll say, hey, Lena, I'll go somewhere, and then I'll send you a telegram or word, and then you can come, with where I'm living. Okay. Of course, I mean, he has no plan of sending anything. He just vanishes and then goes away. And Lena Grove is just sitting there, pregnant with his child. Okay, so she starts to hitchhike, and then, you know, she tries to go to Mississippi, where she thinks this guy is working. Now, she eventually finds this guy, but then he's changed his name. And then in a series of events, another guy called Byron Bunch, he falls in love with Lena, but he doesn't express it. Okay, it's kind of sort of, you know, a similar theme as the last one that we discussed, but you know, he falls in love and then he doesn't express it, and then he feels that it is his responsibility to make Lena find the original father of the unborn child. Okay, so Byron Bunch is the good guy, quote unquote, in this story. Now, the guy who's made Lena pregnant and then vanished, that guy's name is Joe Brown. That's his new name. And then the novel shifts into another scene, the story of Joe Brown's partner. His name is Joe Christmas. Okay, that's his name. It has nothing to do with the festival of Christmas. His name is Joe Christmas. Now, this guy is a psychopath. He is a known criminal. He's committed a lot of crimes. He works in a mill. And this guy's job at the mill is just a cover. I mean, it's just, you know, for time pass. He secretly, what he does is he's making and selling alcohol in the background, which was prohibited at that time. Interwar period, the alcohol was prohibited. And then he's doing something illegal under the covers. He has a relationship with an older woman, and then, you know, some incidents happen, and then that older woman gets murdered. Now, the novel doesn't explicitly say that Joe Christmas or Joe Brown is the murderer. Joe Brown is seen, you know, leaving this old woman, Joanna is her name, and then he is seen leaving this burning house of this lady. Police first suspect Joe Brown. They go behind him, and then they start. And then when they catch him, Joe Brown says, you know, Joe Christmas is a black guy. So immediately the blame shifts onto Christmas. Okay, so he goes and then you know, gets picked up and then gets arrested. Eventually, you know, Joe Christmas gets jailed, and then he escapes and is later killed. Okay, now in the meantime, what happens is Lena delivers a baby, but Joe Brown leaves her again and runs away. And at the end of the story, we are told, you know, an anonymous man. We are not told the name of this man. He is talking to his wife, and then he says, well, I met two strangers, and then I picked them up on a trip to Tennessee. And we are told that these strangers are Lena and Byron. You remember that Byron, the nice guy? Now, Lena and Byron are still looking for this Brown. Okay, they have not stopped. Brown again has now vanished, and these people are just looking for him. Okay, that's the end of the story. Again, I've not explained it in detail because of, you know, want of time, but that's the gist of the story. Okay, now as you can see, the novel is a little violent. Okay, there is murder, there are other crimes, and then they talk about Joe Christmas being this, that, and everything. Now, the structure of the novel goes between the present and flashbacks. It's not a, you know, temporally straightforward one. It talks about present, then goes to the flashback, and then shifts from one character to another character, and that way. Okay, just like we talked about Hemingway, the title of this novel is very interesting. It says Light in August, right? Why Light in August? Again, has nothing to do with light. It has nothing to do with August. Then why Light in August? I mean, of course, Faulkner is not mad to give a title that has nothing to do with the story, but our job is to understand why Light in August. Okay. Again, one basic point that I want to give or mention here is most of literature is interpretation, right? So interpretation by the reader. Now, when I look at this novel, I can come up with themes that I think are, you know, themes. When you look at this novel and then read it, you might come up with completely different set of themes. Okay, we might have some similarities, but then more often than not, we will come up with something else. Now, that's all interpretation, right? So let's hear. Do you have any ideas on why it is light in August? What does that mean? Any guesses? I know I have not told you enough of the story to actually, you know, give a valid answer, but then I just want to see how your thought process is. Anybody? Why do you think there's light in August?
She gave birth to child in August, I think so, sir.
Ah, okay.
So he started new life.
Ah,
The
okay.
quality of light is also less.
Pratisha, can you repeat that?
The quality of light is also less in the period of August, maybe.
Okay, okay, that's an interesting interpretation. Okay, Madhavi, you're right. So one interpretation is, she gave birth to the child in August. So, and then it's a new life. So light in August. Okay, good interpretation. Any other interpretations? Can it be something else?
In search of father, of the child's father.
Sorry, Evelyn. Can you repeat that?
Yes, sir. She was in search of the child's father, maybe in the month of August.
Oh, okay. Okay. But then what is light then? So it can be just August, right?
Yeah.
She found this guy, but then, this guy is an idiot, right? I mean, he's a known criminal. There's no light there. So it explains the August part of the title, but it doesn't explain the light part, right? You agree with me?
Yes, maybe I think she wanted to kill that man.
Kill that man. Okay. Thereby, some kind of redemption. Okay. Yes. That's where the light is. Okay. Good interpretation.
It's a fall of his wisdom.
Fall of his wisdom. Is that what you said?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Fall of whose wisdom?
Dawn of his wisdom.
Okay. Okay. All right. Bhuvana Acharya is saying one birth give a child, started new life. Okay. That is light. Okay, good. So what the major point is not that, we all have to come up with our own interpretation every single time. But the point is we have that opportunity. You can interpret literature in your own way, right? That's the point that you'll have to understand. It's not mandatory for all of us to agree to every single interpretation or individual interpretation that we have. I can have an interpretation just like Madhavi can have an interpretation, just like somebody else or somebody else. Okay. Okay. So another interpretation, which is kind of sort of, okay-ish, is light. The word light, right? It's polysemous. So it has multiple meanings, right? Depending on the context. One context can be making it light. You're holding something heavy and then you can make it light by, dropping it or putting it somewhere or removing stuff from it. So something is heavy and then you are removing some weight and then it becomes light. So if you look at light, the word light in that sense, then we can look at, Lena Grove, who is pregnant at the starting of the story. So she's heavy because of the baby, and then she becomes light by the end of the story. And like, I'm not sure who said that, but she gives birth to the child in August. So, light in August, something of that sort. That also can be as improbable or not improbable, as weird, for lack of a better word, it sounds, that's still a good interpretation. Okay. So there's no right or wrong answer when it comes to literature interpretation. Okay. As long as you can corroborate what you're saying with some kind of, theory or some kind of thought process, then it's all good. Okay. There's no right or wrong answer. Okay. Now, this is fine. As somebody said, light refers to she has gone and then she has killed the guy and then that's where light is. That's also a good interpretation. All these are good interpretations. Somebody said it can be interpreted as enlightenment or something. That's also good. He realizes his wisdom. I think that's the word that they used. That's all good. But these are all different interpretations. That's great. But what did Faulkner think of? These are all our interpretations, right? This is Ashwin's interpretation or Madhavi's interpretation or somebody's, Mary Evelyn's interpretation. This is all good. But what did Faulkner think about it? When somebody asked Faulkner, why on earth did you put this title, Light in August? Faulkner said, it has nothing to do with Lena. It has nothing to do with Christmas. It has nothing to do with any of the characters. But when he lived in Mississippi in the month of August, there are a couple of days where the day is brighter. Okay, there's more light for, various phenomena. It just seems like the day is brighter. He says, the story reminded him of those days. So that's why he put the title as Light in August. Okay. What does this prove? We can be totally off the mark from what the author is thinking. Okay. That's why the interpretations are important in literature. Okay. Like I said, there's no right or wrong interpretation. The author basically said, no, it has nothing to do with anything. It is just, there are these 2 days in August where the light is brighter. That's why I said light in August, period. It's as simple as that. But we as readers have come up with these multiple interpretations saying enlightenment, light in August, somebody got murdered, all these things. Right. So that's the point of what I'm saying. Okay. Dawning of wisdom. I'm sorry. I'm going to the chat now. Archana says hope, dawning of wisdom. Vinay says light in other means is the coming out of ignorance. Very good. Yeah, that's the enlightenment part, right, Vinay? So that's what I was saying. So enlightenment can be brought into this whole picture. Okay, good. So let us very quickly move to the themes of this novel. We have 15 more minutes. So one is again alienation. This keeps coming back to us in pretty much every story. Most of the characters in the novel are social misfits in one way or the other. So they experience alienation. Byron Bunch, our nice guy or the protagonist. While he's accepted where he lives, he's still viewed as a mystery or simply overlooked. Okay, nobody cares about him. Nobody, really talks to him and that kind of stuff. So he's eccentric. He's different. Joe Christmas, Lena Grove, they are strangers in town. They come from someplace else, and both are social misfits because Joe Christmas, like I said, he's a super violent guy and then very aggressive. He fights with everyone. And Lena is actually looked down upon because, she got pregnant and somebody left her. So the society treats her very badly. So all this is alienation. That's pretty explanatory. Now, the second thing that I want to talk about is Christian symbolism. We have also talked about this a little bit in the previous classes where we said religion has a lot of impact on American literature in specific and in general also across world literatures. Now, this is one thing is pretty evident in this whole story. The guy's name is Joe Christmas. So that is a direct reference to Christian symbolism. But there are also many instances of Christian allegories and symbolism from the Bible in this whole thing. Mildred says, honor the southern light because we always honor northern lights. It's about pregnancy, which take 9-month period to read this book. It'll take 8 hours with 2 words within it. Wow. Okay. Okay, that's an interesting perspective. I really like that perspective. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Okay, another theme is good and evil. Obviously, this whole story has good people, bad people. Joe Christmas are bad guy. Byron Bunch are good guy. So there's good and evil both in this story. You can put that as a theme. Anything else? Any other themes that you can think of?
Yes, racial fantasism is also a theme.
Racial problem. Okay. Can you explain it a little bit? Why do you think racial? Where is the racial problem here?
Because they are saying about the Christianity civilization and the religious. So it comes under the racial fantasism, right?
And all these things that have happened in the South. And it's all because of racial problems that have occurred. It's always to do with the color. It's always to do with the people and what they speak and what they, I think.
Right. Yeah. Who was the first one? Was it Jyoti or Pooja? Who said about the racial thing?
The Pratyusha.
Pratyusha. Okay. Yeah. Both. If you see it, both Pratyusha and Mildred, both of them talked about racial, problem, and both of them are right. Right. One is where you are racially subjugating the other based on their color, and then like Mildred said, it's the South, so they were in favor of slavery. They were in favor of these racial things, and that's how you can bring in racial thing. Very good. Yeah. Anything else? Any other theme that you can think of?
Maybe gender also.
You mean gender inequality, right?
Yes, gender inequality, yes. Okay,
excellent. Okay, gender inequality because Lena Grove was looked upon very down because she got pregnant. Yes. Now, if something like that happens, but then Joe Christmas, this guy happily had a relationship with Lena Grove and then he ran away, but nobody said anything to him. Right? That's what you're saying, right? That's where the inequality comes into picture.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
Sir, you spoke about Christian symbolism, which you taken out the words from Ecclesiasticus. Can you say about that, sir?
No, that was for the previous one, Mildred.
Okay.
It was not from the light in August, but then, when I was talking about this one, the sun also rises. And I said, the sun also rises is directly lifted from Ecclesiastes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Where, King Solomon talks about, the sun rises, the sun goes down, and then he goes down only to come up the next day. That kind of thing.
Okay.
Okay, good discussion. You can think of other themes also. There are other themes.
Identity may be also a theme.
Okay, I like that. But can you explain why identity is a theme?
Because the lady is not getting the proper the way she got pregnant and she was what we say, she faced many problems with them. So there is no identity for that lady.
Okay. Okay, that's good. Sorry, something just popped up. Hold on for a second. Okay, good. Yeah, that's good thinking actually. Yeah, she's continuously in search of her identity because the society and her situation doesn't let her be one thing, right? The moment she was in a relationship, she was a normal girl in a relationship, but then the minute the guy runs away, she's now a single lady with an unborn child, and then the father is missing. And then she keeps searching for that identity. Eventually, in the end, she still cannot find that identity because, like I said, in the end, she's still searching for this guy.
Yes.
Right. Okay, good. Okay, let's just move on. You can, again, like I said, you can think of other themes also. You can come up with a lot of themes in this, but let's move on in the interest of time. We have like about 10 minutes, but anyway. Okay, answering questions from this unit, a couple of sample questions are, discuss the themes of Sun Also Rises. You all know how to answer this. You have, I'm very glad of how you're responding to the themes. You have complicated thinking, which is very good. So I'm sure you will do great on this answer. You can come up with the themes. Now, the second one is a little tough. Why? Because the question says, examine light in August as a struggle between good and evil. Now, it's not asking you about the themes. It's not asking you about anything specifically about the characters. It just says, good and evil are there. What do you think? Examine it and then give your opinion of it. Okay. This is where knowing the story helps you, because you can, put people into two buckets, some people in the good bucket and then some people in the evil bucket, compare and contrast their characters, and then give your opinion in the end. Okay.
Yeah, morals and beliefs also, we can say that morals and beliefs. From the experience, they can give the moral, we can get the morals also.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. One sec.
So what is the main theme, sir, in this lesson?
I'm sorry, did somebody say something? Lavanya, are you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. What is the main theme, sir, in this lesson?
I'm not hearing you properly. Can you repeat that?
What is the main theme, sir? What is the main theme in Light in August?
Or what's the main theme?
Main theme, yes, sir.
Okay, so it can be like I listed three, right?
It's good and evil.
Yes, it's good and evil. It can be alienation. It depends on what you are going to write about. Okay, if you're going to write about alienation is obviously the major theme. Okay, if you're writing about good and evil, then good and evil is the major theme. Okay, these are basically two big themes in that story. Okay, so first one is a straightforward answer. Second one, like I said, it's a subjective answer. If you know the story and the major characters, you can easily write this answer. Okay, very quickly, let's talk about, contemporary fiction. This is block 2, unit 8, for those of you who are following the book. We'll talk a little bit about Beat Generation and then a little bit about a post-war novel. Now, we have discussed, if you remember, or if you're following from, last week, we have talked about 18th century fiction. Then we talked about 19th century fiction yesterday and today. Then now, today we also discussed about the 20th century American fiction. Let's move a little further and then discuss contemporary fiction. Now, the problem that we immediately get here is, what is contemporary? How do you define contemporary? Okay. Now, it depends on who you ask, and it depends on the context. But from our context, for our purpose of discussion, we will call anything that happened after World War II is contemporary. So anything after 1945, that's when the World War II ended. Anything after 1945, we'll call that contemporary. Okay. Nagalakshmi, yeah, dissatisfaction is also a theme for this. Yes, it is a theme.
Sir, 1 second, repeat, sir. This is Chakravarti speaking, sir.
Yeah, go on.
Once again, repeat, sir.
Repeat. Which one? Contemporary. The definition of contemporary.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So for our purposes, contemporary fiction is anything that is written after World War II. World War II ended in 1945. Okay, so anything that is written after 1945, we will call it with the term contemporary fiction. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so one thing that is obvious is the post-war novel, right? I mean, there's a war that happened, and then there's so much carnage, there is so much killing, there is so much, trauma and everything. An obvious offshoot is the post-war novel, where, people will write about what happened in the war and then the trauma that it has caused. It has brought dislocation physically, mentally. There is a lot of impact mentally to people. So post-war novel is one of the basic things. Now, excuse me. If you look at it, apart from the human loss, the war also has a lot of impact psychologically on people. It's not just, bunch of people fighting with each other, killing each other, and that's the end of the war. It doesn't happen that way, right? After the war, it has tremendous impact psychologically on people. We've seen this in our discussion about Hemingway's, Jake Barnes, right? The war also induced this aggression into him, and then he was, he was trying to control his life, but then he cannot control his life, and then he's traumatic and everything. So we have seen that. But not everyone can realize these desires. So, they searched for other avenues, like we talked about. They depended on alcohol, drug addiction, and that kind of, stuff. Now, when you talk about this, William Burroughs comes to mind. Now, he's the major character in this group called Beat Generation. What is Beat Generation? Beat Generation is a bunch of writers who published their work in the 1950s, and then they explored the American culture and politics. That was their major theme of the writing. They wrote a lot about American culture. They wrote a lot about politics. Now, what makes them different? They were excuse me, they were non-conformists in different ways. Okay, they didn't conform to societal rules. They experimented with drugs. They made spiritual quests. They got influenced a lot by Eastern religions. So there are a bunch of people. Some of them are Allen Ginsberg, William Burroughs, Jack Kerouac. I don't know if you know these names, but these are some of the people who were part of that Beat Generation. Okay, very quickly, mid-20th century and later, it was a time for technological advancements, right? Mid-century was, mid-20th century and later, a lot of technological advancements happened. And that's when, this obviously reflected in literature also. A typical example is Thomas Pynchon's V. The novel is called V. It was published in 1960s. Then there were some which were published in 1970s. Gravity's Rainbow comes to mind. So all these talk about not just the war and related stuff, but technological advancements, about robots, and then how can robots take over, and then how can robots be protagonist, antagonist, whatever in their novels. Now, women authors also, like Toni Morrison, Alice Walker, these people also wrote in the second half of the 20th century. So slowly, steadily, we are seeing, more work written by women. We will talk about this in our last block, which covers women's writing. But just remember that, in the second part of 20th century, there was a lot of productive work that happened from these women authors, from a fiction perspective and non-fiction also. Anyway, I'm sure your course book lists some other authors from this time period. So please take a look at that. And I'm not sure when the course book was written, but I'm sure they don't talk about post 2000 authors. Okay, because we said contemporary is anything written after 1945. We should also talk about authors until now. Okay. So writers like, Louise Hedrich, I think we'll talk about her in our poetry thing. We'll talk about Dennis Johnson and these kind of people. We'll get to them when we get to them in poetry and drama and everything. Okay, let's just recap before we wrap up. Can somebody tell me who wrote The Sun Also Rises? Anyone?
Hemingway.
Hemingway.
Hemingway. Good. Okay, and then let's skip the second one for now. But the third one is, what is your interpretation of title Light in the August? We've talked about that in length. We all, excuse me, we all had our interpretations, and then we also talked about what Faulkner's interpretation of, or what Faulkner thought about before, titling that Light in August. Okay. Okay, let's take a pause here. I think it's about 1 now, exactly on the dot. We'll take a pause here, and then we'll continue in the next class. In the next class, what we'll do is we'll move to American poetry. We'll start with what American poetry is, then we'll talk about what the characteristics are, and then we will move to two very, very, very important people from poetry, American poetry, Walt Whitman and Emily Dickinson. And we'll also talk about other poets like Robert Frost, and then we will talk about contemporary American poetry, and then we'll end that particular block there. Okay. Any questions for me on what's going to happen? Oh, yeah. When we come to drama, I would next week I would ask for a volunteer to talk about. There are 2 dramas I think we'll talk about, and then I'll ask one of you to summarize in the class. So I'll give you 1 week's time. That we'll talk about next week. And if you can just, quickly summarize, it's because I'm summarizing everything, the story wise. And I think a change would be welcome when one of you does it. Okay. But we'll talk about that next week. So as far as this week or the previous week is concerned, any questions so far, or can we just, call it a day?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me very quickly check if the chat has any questions for me. Okay, no questions. Okay, thanks for your patient listening. And yeah, you all have a good weekend and a week, and then we'll talk next week. All right?
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye.
Sir, thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Sadia.
Sir, excellent, sir. Excellent.